All right, hello everybody. This is Antonio Wolf. We are continuing A Voyage to Arcturus. We are on Chapter 7, Pan-Aw. The husband got up to meet his wife and their guest. He was clothed in white. He had a beardless face with breve and points. His skin, on face and body alike, was so white, fresh, and soft that it scarcely looked like skin at all. It rather resembled a new kind of pure, snowy flesh extending right down to his bones. It had nothing in common with the artificially whitened skin of an over-civilized woman. Its whiteness and delicacy aroused no voluptuous thoughts. It was obviously the manifestation of a cold and almost cruel chastity of nature. His hair, which fell to the nape of his neck, also was white, but again from vigor, not decay. His eyes were black, quiet and fathomless. He was still a young man, but so stern were his features that he had the appearance of a lawgiver, and this in spite of their great beauty and harmony. His Magan and Joywin's intertwined for a single moment, and Maskell saw his face soften with love, while she looked exultant. She put him in her husband's arms with gentle force, and stood back, gazing and smiling. Maskell felt rather embarrassed at being embraced by a man, but submitted to it. A sense of cool, pleasant languor passed through him in the act. The stranger is red-blooded, then? He was startled by Pan-Aw speaking in English, and the voice, too, was extraordinary. It was absolutely tranquil, but its tranquillity seemed in a curious fashion to be an illusion, proceeding from a rapidity of thoughts and feelings so great that their motion could not be detected. How this could be, he did not know. "How do you come to speak in a tongue you have never heard before?" demanded Maskell. "Thought is a rich, complex thing. I can't say if I'm really speaking your tongue by instinct, or if you yourself are translating my thoughts into your tongue as I utter them." "Already you see that Pan-Aw is wiser than I am," said Joeywind gaily. "What is your name?" asked the husband. "Maskell." "That name must have a meaning. But again, thought is a strange thing. I connect that name with something. But with what?" "Try to discover," said Joywind. "Has there been a man in your world who stole something from the Maker of the universe in order to ennoble his fellow creatures?" "There is such a myth. The hero's name was Prometheus." "Well, you seem to be identified in my mind with that action. But what it all means I can't say, Maskell." "Accept it as a good omen, for Pan-Aw never lies and never speaks thoughtlessly." "There must be some confusion. These are heights beyond me," said Maskell calmly, but looking rather contemplative. "Where do you come from?" "From the planet of a distant sun, called Earth." "What for?" "I was tired of vulgarity," returned Maskell laconically. He intentionally avoided mentioning his fellow voyagers in order that Cragg's name should not come to light. "That's an honorable motive," said Pan-Aw. "And what's more, it may be true, though you spoke it as a prevarication." "As far as it goes, it's quite true," said Maskell, staring at him with annoyance and surprise. So just to comment a little bit back. Our main boy, is either an instance of Prometheus or is in the Promethean spirit, which would be generally the same. Pan-Aw's exterior, just like Joywind's, very much matches his character. Solid white, fresh, soft, scarcely look like skin, new kind of pure, snowy flesh extending right down his bones. Its whiteness and delicacy aroused no voluptuous thoughts. It was obviously the manifestation of a cold and almost cruel chastity of nature. He's in awe of everything. He's very thoughtful. Speaks very deliberately. Black eyes in comparison to very white flesh. We're going to see that he's kind of a mystic, which fits very well with the indeterminacy of how he looks. Like his skin is white, his robe is white, his hair is white. His eyes alone offer a distinction, which is little distinction because it's just solid black in his demeanor. He asks Maskell if he's red. Well, he asks Joywind if the stranger's red-blooded. Don't know what that would mean to them. See, if you remember, like in the last one, the last chapters, Maskell said he doesn't know quite why he's in torments, why he went. But here he says he was tired of vulgarity. Which is, increasingly as the story moves on, that is quite true. He was just bored of everything on Earth. Nothing interested him anymore. Anything to add, Hyperion, or
no? Not to that. The red-blooded thing maybe just like they were already familiar. I think they're like partially psychic, so it's like, you can kind of tell.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell something's off with Joywind because she's sharing his blood now.
Yeah, probably. So they're in front of this lake thing. So the swampy lake extended for about half a mile from where they were standing to the lower buttresses of the mountain. Feathery purple reeds showed themselves here and there through the shallows. The water was dark green. Maskell did not see how they were going to cross it. Joywind caught his arm. Perhaps you don't know that the lake will bear us? Panal walked onto the water. It was so heavy that it carried his weight. Joywind followed with Maskell. He instantly started to slip about. Nevertheless, the motion was amusing, and he learned so fast by watching and imitating Panal that he was soon able to balance himself without assistance. After that, he found the sport excellent. For the same reason that women excel in dancing, Joywind's half-falls and recoveries were far more graceful and sure than those of either of the men. Her slight, draped form, dipping, bending, rising, swaying, twisting upon the surface of the dark water, this was a picture Maskell could not keep his eyes away from. The lake grew deeper. The Nall water became green-black. The crags, gullies, and precipices of the shore could now be distinguished in detail. A waterfall was visible, descending several hundred feet. The surface of the lake grew disturbed, so much so that Maskell had difficulty in keeping his balance. He therefore threw himself down and started swimming on the surface of the water. Joywind turned her head and laughed so joyously that all her teeth flashed in the sunlight. They landed in a few more minutes on a promontory of black rock. The water in Maskell's garment and body evaporated very quickly. He gazed upward at the towering mountain, but at that moment some strange movement on the part of Panal attracted his attention. His face was working convulsively, and he began to stagger about. Then he put his hand to his mouth and took from it what looked like a bright-colored pebble. He looked at it carefully for some seconds. Joywind also looked over his shoulder with quickly changing colors. After this inspection, Panal let the object, whatever it was, fall to the ground and took no more interest in it. May I look? Asked Maskell, and without waiting for permission, he picked it up. It was a beautiful egg-shaped crystal of pale green. Where did this come from? He asked queerly. Panna turned away, but Joywind answered for him. It came out of my husband. That's what I thought, but I couldn't believe it. But what is it? I don't know that it has either name or use. It is merely an overflowing of beauty. Beauty? Joywind smiled. If you were to regard nature as the husband and Panna as the wife, Maskell, perhaps everything would be explained. Maskell reflected. On Earth, he said after a minute, men like Panna are called artists, poets, and musicians. Beauty overflows in them too, and out of them again. The only distinction is that their productions are more human and intelligible. Nothing comes from it but vanity, said Panna, and taking the crystal out of Maskell's hand, he threw it into the lake. Just going back a little bit. So them walking on the lake is interesting. Obviously, the lake is full of null water. It's the most impure that the Maskell has encountered so far. The really pure one's supposed to be very clear, but this one's highly impure. And more physical, so they can walk on it. I mean, I guess that has like some kind of ontological meaning. Immediately I think, well, okay, it's more impure, more physical, therefore, more solid, makes sense. But also it makes sense that, knowledge is the kind of thing that, allows you to traverse intellectually in the spiritual. So, the fact that it's a slippery and fluid knowledge, but still a knowledge that is determinate, allows you to move along the line of knowledge. If we think about Plato's divided line between like apparent knowledge and actual knowledge. Even though it's not full knowledge, some knowledge is still something that lets you move and grasp out the world. As for the green stone thing, like shaped crystal pale green, really neat. I mean, it's explained already what it is. Hmm? Hold on. Be right back.
All right.
Don't worry, I'll let it out.
Okay.
Space. Our neighbor's tarp shed blew over into our yard. And it's too big for us to move it right now. We need their help and they're not here.
Oh, okay.
And it was a continue. So, yeah, nothing more to be said about the stone thing. Already
I have
being
a lot.
explained. Oh, you want to say something? Sure.
Well, his intrusion into nature, the overflow, is like artists on Earth, right? He says, this is relatable to me, his aversion to such a thing. So nothing comes from it but vanity. It's an interesting line. There are a lot of artists that wish to be famous instead of create great art. You know, they may take a genuine interest in art, but what they really want is vain recognition, and that's what he's against, because he's not impressed by it, you know, because he creates beauty just naturally, I guess you could say. Many of our favorite artists, including David Lindsay, have something that they want to get out, that they feel like they must get out. They feel like the world needs this. You know, it's not just, oh, I want to do something, I want to be famous or whatever. They have the genuine artistic achievement capability, not continually replicating the same types of media over and over. So it's interesting that he mentions artists. Maskell mentions artists. He's talking about painters, poets, and musicians. This isn't a coincidence. These are the three greatest art forms. These are the only ones that are true art forms.
Mm-hmm.
And they can be combined, of course. You know, you can have music with lyrics and with, descriptive images. But they're conveying something transcendental, usually, if they're high art. And that's what we should achieve.
Yeah, that's what he says. More human and intelligible.
Yeah. Yeah, he's
So
talking
the
about
analogy is,
transcendental here.
yeah. So, like, we create, the artists here do something that is fundamentally impossible, but nonetheless it is trying to be achieved, which is to present, like, something that is purely transcendental, and you can't really do it. You can only, you haphazardly do it with any sensuous medium. Whereas on this world, someone like Pana is basically engaging in what Hegel calls a natural beauty. Except, rather than representing natural beauty, he's directly instantiating natural beauty.
Yeah.
And it's obvious why, well, it'll become more obvious, why Pana thinks it's just vanity to, sit around and stare and go like, ooh, how amazing, how great. It's vanity because he didn't do anything. Just like, a genuine artist doesn't really do anything to make their art. Inspiration literally comes into them, and, they are kind of forced to just produce the piece of art, to get it out of them. It's an itch that they need to scratch. Likewise, Pano has like suddenly these moments in which, this kind of production has to happen physically. He does it. It comes. He looks at it. He's like, okay, well, yeah, sure. Another example of shaping, but okay, and you move on.
Yeah, and he throws it into the lake because to him it's like, it happened and it's useless. I do the same thing. This is extremely relatable to me because I write poetry that no one will ever see. I just delete them afterwards. I just do it, and then it happens, and then it's over. It's not necessary to show to the world. But he's in awe of everything, but he's not in awe of this process.
Yeah. The, the precipice they now had to climb was several 100 feet in height. Maskell was more anxious for Joywind than for himself. She was evidently tiring, but she refused all help, and was in fact still the nimbler of the two. She made a mocking face at him. Panos seemed lost in quiet thoughts. The rock was sound and did not crumble under their weight. The heat of branch spell, however, was by this time almost killing. The radiance was shocking in its white intensity, and Maskell's pain steadily grew worse. When they got to the top, a plateau of dark rock appeared, bare of vegetation, stretching in both directions as far as the eye could see. It was of a nearly uniform width of 500 yards, from the edge of the cliffs to the lower slopes of the chain of hills inland. The hills varied in height. The cup-shaped pulling dread was approximately 1,000 feet above them. The upper part of it was covered with a kind of glittering vegetation, which he could not comprehend. Joywind put her hand on Maskell's shoulder and pointed upward. Here you have the highest peak in the whole land. That is, until you come to the Ivdon Marest. Another name for another place. Ivdon. Simple. It's kind of a question. Well, if it dawns.
You may rest.
Yeah, that's the immediate verbal pun I think that is intended.
Yeah.
But Marest is also kind of like a bog marsh, something like that, if I remember correctly. And when we get to the chapter on that place, you will understand why. And the name is very fitting. Marest.
Marest as a word doesn't really mean anything to my mind.
No, it is an actual word. It's just like I looked it up before. It is a kind of like some kind of like bog or something.
An actual place?
It's a description of like a type of land.
Like a marsh?
Yeah, some kind of like marsh. It's French, swamp, marsh, or bog.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, on hearing that strange name, he experienced a momentary, unaccountable sensation of wild vigor and restlessness. But it passed away. Interesting thing, like in this world, language is in a state in which, supposedly, according to ancient mystics and esoteric views, this was how like the early Earth was like. The idea that words have power, that that the idea of incantation and the proper pronunciation, that this was important. They say is not some stupid thing that we made up. That there was at some point in the world in which words literally were the ontological being of things. Here he just hears a name and it affects him on a deep level, on an intuitive level, despite the fact he doesn't even know what exactly that place is. Like just the name alone already like entices some factor of his own being to be engaged. And we've already seen that just seeing things certainly affects him in ways, and how much more it would affect somebody being someplace. So without losing time, Panal led the way up the mountainside. The lower half was of bare rock, not difficult to climb. Halfway up, however, it grew steeper, and they began to meet bushes and small trees. The growth became thicker as they continued to ascend, and when they neared the summit, tall forest trees appeared. These bushes and trees had pale, glassy trunks and branches, but the small twigs and the leaves were translucent and crystal. They cast no shadows from above, but still the shade was cool. Both leaves and branches were fantastically shaped. What surprised Maskell the most, however, was the fact that, as far as he could see, scarcely any two plants belonged to the same species. Let's see. "Won't you help Maskell out of this difficulty?" said Joywyn, pulling her husband's arm. He smiled. "If he'll forgive me for again trespassing in his brain. But the difficulty is small. Life on a new planet, Maskell, is necessarily energetic and lawless, and not sedate and imitative. Nature is still fluid, not yet rigid, and matter is plastic. The will forks and sports incessantly, and thus no two creatures are alike." "Well, I understand all that," replied Maskell, after listening attentively. "But what I don't grasp is this. If living creatures here sport so energetically, how does it come about that human beings wear much the same shape as in my world?" "I'll explain that too," said Panal. "All creatures that resemble shaping must of necessity resemble one another." "Then sporting is the blind will to become like shaping?" "Exactly." "It is most wonderful," said Maskell. "Then the brotherhood of man is not a fable invented by idealists, but a solid fact." Joywyn looked at him and changed color. Panal relapsed into sternness. So going back to the transparent forest. That goes well with this being an indeterminate beginning. Like Joywyn's generally indeterminate, so is Panal in a different way. The indeterminacy of thinking versus the indeterminacy of emotion. They're very one-sided people. They're dominated by one kind of a comportment of an aesthetic kind. One of them is, very aesthetic with feeling. Joywyn, the other one's more towards the intellectual aesthetic, but still very much rooted in the aesthetic. And then these trees, while still, determinate, I mean, he says like they'll have all kinds of funky shapes and none of them are alike. Their transparency is telling of their indeterminacy. They're not quite solid. They don't have their own standing out on a colorful level. They cast no shadows, but still the shade was cool. And that's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't think about that the last time.
So, I mean, that is, I think, goes along with the indeterminacy thing. They are indeterminate, but they're still determinate. Despite the fact that, it seems that they're kind of just these empty forms. They're like mere crystallized shapes. Nonetheless, they do have some material being to them. Even if something is seemingly crystal clear, it does divert some light. And, of course, the light of this world is not like the light of ours. So maybe that's what's connected to that. Let's see. Panal says, life on a new planet is necessarily energetic and lawless and not sedate and imitative. Energetic in that there's a lot of it, lawless in that there seems to be no unifying pattern, not sedate, and that obviously it's things probably are changing quite a lot more often than they are in our world. And imitative also related regarding, or not imitative, in the sense that if there's no unifying law, no unifying pattern to these, uh, they are as radically singular as you can get.
Yeah. And if novelty theory is taken into consideration, why create a new planet if you're just going to imitate another planet? You know, have some sort of variation.
Mm-hmm.
Why have a new planet if the universe is conscious and creates new planets and so on to do new things? They have to be completely new. They can't just be cheap replicas of the other planets or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, this brings Steiner to mind. I think we spoke about it the last episode about
Yeah.
the new planets and so on. Though.
Yep. Let's see. The shape of the human.
Yeah.
Being the same. This is also something that comes out of esoteric stuff. A lot of people would think that this is some kind of anthropocentric, what do you call,
Arbitrary definition, arbitrary application
all right,
to the
hold on, sorry.
to the shape of the human. Oh, so
Hello, can you hear me? I can hear you. Yep. The earliest bus leaves about 6, and it takes about an hour. We should leave like an hour 30 before that. Mm-hmm. At 4:30, if you want to leave at 6. There's a bus that leaves at 8, and it takes about 2 hours to get there. Yeah, they take 2 hours to get there, but like the earliest one that leaves is at 6, and we'll get there at 8, and the other one leaves at 8, and we'll get there at 10. Yeah, I mean, I'm fine going like at 8. Uh, the earliest bus comes back at 4. We'd be back here around 6. Uh, the latest one leaves at like 6:30. So depending if you want to like be around to like see sunset, we could come back out around 6. That's the 6:30, and we'll be back here by 8 or so. We'll probably be back here at 9 because it's 2 hours to go from there to the bus stop, and then from there we'll drive back, and it'll be about an hour. Mm-hmm. All right. All right. Don't forget. Right. Sorry about that. Hello.
I'm here. Where should we start from? We're stellar shaped. We're star shaped.
Yeah. Let's just restart the whole point.
Okay.
The unity of the human form across all worlds. Steiner has a whole thing explaining why that is. I know what's his name. Swedenborg has a thing explaining why that is.
Emanuel Swedenborg.
Yeah. Hegel has an explanation of why that is. And once you understand like why that is, it actually makes perfect sense. Hegel's explanation, as far as I can tell, has to do with the fact that on the material level, at least, there are certain kinds of aesthetic necessities which do not make sense otherwise. One, the most rational beings are going to be dimorphic. The male and female sex will be split. Two, they will have to be erect beings. They will have to walk upright. The reason for this is that this goes aesthetically with the necessities of universality and of self-transcending. An erect being, can overlook above the land rather than being a being that crawls. Hands are definitely a requirement.
Yes. Hands are a microcosm of the body because we have 5 digits.
Or 6. 6 is actually superior. People don't know this.
Yeah, 6 may be superior. If anyone's familiar with the esoteric Christianity or the apocryphal text, the giants who have 6 fingers, 6 toes.
Yeah, but and physically, it's actually known to be superior. You have a level of dexterity, above someone with 5 fingers. That seems to work out much better. But anyways, like the hands thing, we have to have hands, we have to have fingers. They allow for a level of dexterity that nothing else, tentacles and stuff, they will not do. They don't suffice. And anything that's, clawed, supposing that we had claws or whatever, then we would get to a point in which, like, rationally we'd be shaving those down. Just for the sake of dexterity anyways.
It's a limitation.
Omnivorousness is related, at least at a certain point of that kind of species being. You won't have a species like that will be herbivores.
Carnivores.
Carnivores have a forward-looking drive that herbivores do not.
Yes.
And you need that forward-looking drive. You need to have the cunning of a predator to be a Prometheus, to have that kind of foresight. Because only a predator really needs that kind of foresight. A prey animal does not. So there are certain things that just rationally have to attain for a rational being in this world, as far as the kind of planets that we live on. Whether on other planets, things may be so different that intelligence would develop in different ways. It might, one might say, well, Steiner says that there's intelligent, amoeboids in space, but intelligence, quote unquote, only in a very basic sense. Like, these are not like beings that they're doing philosophy or they're making technology. Why would they? They don't have a need for very much. Their lives are very simple, and therefore their own cognition is very simple. So he says, so anyways, panels, Alex, all creatures resemble shaping, must of necessity resemble one another. That's basically the gist. What's his name? Swedenborg and Steiner says, well, when it is said that we are made in the image of God, this is not, it's not a mere metaphor.
Yeah.
William Blake says, the image of God is man.
Both physically and spiritually.
Yeah, spiritually.
And I don't know if you mentioned, sorry, I was rereading, but an upright spine is necessary as well for health, for good health. A straight spine. The head having the crown chakra and the energies coming in. The soft topness of the baby's head being evidence of this. That might be too deep for this. I'm not going to get into it, but look into that if you're interested in this sort of stuff, so that you know that the shape of the human is not just an arbitrary shape.
Yeah. So continuing. Maskell became interested in a new phenomenon. The jail-colored blossoms of a crystal bush were emitting mental waves, which with his breath he could clearly distinguish. They cried out silently, "To me, to me." While he looked, a flying worm guided itself through the air to one of these blossoms and began to suck its nectar. The floral cry immediately ceased. So that is something else that you'll find reported in mystical experiences of certain kinds. This is like an intellectual intuition of some natural, let's just call it phenomenon that's ongoing, which necessarily would look a certain way physically, just like, color is related to the wave, the measure of the waves of light. But the physicality does not exhaust the full explanation. Like here, he's getting a different sense that that he has access to, which we don't in this world, where he can see there's a different layer of some relationship ongoing. In this case, like everything in this planet to some extent is alive, and as alive, it will have some kind of active soul and interrelationship with other souls. It also goes with like what they mentioned earlier about the back rays. How do flowers follow the sun if the nature of light isn't a two-way thing, that it pushes and pulls. So they now gained the crest of the mountain and looked down beyond. A lake occupied its crater-like cavity. A fringe of trees partly intercepted the view, but Maskell was able to perceive that this mountain lake was nearly circular and perhaps a quarter of a mile across. Its shore stood 100 feet below them. Observing that his host did not propose to descend, he begged them to wait for him, and scrambled down to the surface. When he got there, he found the water perfectly motionless and of a colorless transparency. He walked onto it, lay down at full length, and peered into the depths. It was weirdly clear. He could see down for an indefinite distance, without anything at any bottom. Some dark, shadowy objects, almost out of reach of his eyes, were moving about. Then a sound, very faint and mysterious, seemed to come up through the null water from an immense depth. It was like the rhythm of a drum. There were 4 beats of equal length, but the accent was on the third. It went on for a considerable time, and then ceased. The sound appeared to him to belong to a different world from that in which he was traveling. The latter was mystical, dreamlike, and unbelievable. The drumming was like a very dim undertone of reality. It resembled the ticking of a clock in a room full of voices, only occasionally possible to be picked up by the ear. So, very fitting. It seems to me they're at the top pulling dread. That's like they were standing up at top at the edge of the cup, so to say. He goes down. The Null water is perfectly clear as it gets. And what do you know? He looks down. He can't even see a bottom, which is strange. What he sees are these dark, shadowy objects almost out of reach of his eyes were moving about. This is indeed how many people describe the intellectual, that even, with the clearest of regular cognition, something like the Platonic forms, for example, remain these shadowy objects, out of reach of the sensuously tied understanding. Which is why, people find people who are very much stuck in the perception of this world find it very difficult, if not impossible, to engage in something like pure intellectual speculation about metaphysics and stuff, pure forms. To them, it just does seem like these vague shadows. And then, of course, Null water, knowledge, gnosis. What does he hear? He hears the drums, the same drums that it seems he heard at the Gap of Sorgi.
Yep.
And then, like last time, it was mentioned that despite like the roaring of the waves, the drum beat somehow came in like perfectly clear. It was abnormal. It did sound strange. He felt that it was strangely somewhat otherworldly, but here it seems that's even stronger. Mystical, dreamlike, and unbelievable. A very dim undertone of reality. And just like genuine gnosis, really. It's like these little things that you don't quite understand, but they keep pulling you along. They draw you in towards enlightenment. He rejoined Panaw and Joywind, but said nothing to them about his experience. They all walked around the rim of the crater and gazed down on the opposite side. Precipices similar to those that had overlooked the desert were here formed the boundary of a vast moorland plain, whose dimensions could not be measured by the eye. It was solid land, yet he could not make out its prevailing color. It was as if made of transparent glass, but it did not glitter in the sunlight. No objects in it could be distinguished, except a rolling river in the far distance, and farther off still, on the horizon, a line of dark mountains of strange shapes. Instead of being rounded, conical, or hog-backed, these heights were carved by nature into the semblance of castle battlements, but with extremely deep indentations. The sky immediately above the mountains was of a vivid, intense blue. It contrasted in a most marvelous way with the blue of the rest of the heavens. It seemed more luminous and radiant. It was in fact like the afterglow of a gorgeous blue sunset. Interesting. So Maskell kept on looking. The more he gazed, the more restless and noble became his feelings. What is that light? Panaw was sterner than usual, while his wife clung to his arm. It is Alpane, our second son, he replied. Those hills are the Ifdon Marest. Now let us get to our shelter. Is it imagination, or am I really being affected, tormented by that light? No, it is not imagination. It's real. How can it be otherwise when two suns of different natures are drawing you at the same time? Luckily, you are not looking at all pain itself. It's invisible here. You would need to go at least as far as Ifton to set eyes on it. Why do you say luckily? Because the agony caused by those opposing forces would perhaps be more than you could bear. But I don't know. So yet again, bottomless gnaw water, indeterminate, clear, minus some vague shapes. And then here they look at a vast moorland as far as the eye could see, solid on like the lake, but he could not make out its prevailing color. It was as if it was made transparent glass, but it did not glitter in the sunlight. So indeterminate solidity or indeterminate. Everything here is indeterminate, really. The trees are somewhat indeterminate. The water is indeterminate. The ground, or at least this ground, is indeterminate. No object in it could be distinguished except a rolling river in the far distance, and far off still on the horizon a line of dark mountains of strange shapes. The fact that only a rolling river in the far distance could be seen, and rivers all are themselves, pretty indeterminate, but still it's a fluid indeterminacy rather than a static one. It's dynamic. So you go from a static indeterminacy to a dynamic indeterminacy to quite more clear determinacy. These mountains are shaped like castle battlements, but with extremely deep indentations. To very odd shapes. Nature rarely has right angles, and these mountains are described as basically as being very right angular. Which is a very determinate form as opposed to just colorless glass or gelatinous water. We got the name of our second sun, the little blue sun. It's named Alpane, and it's Alpane. The Alps being I don't know. Did they think that was like the highest mountain at the time? I don't think it's the highest mountain now.
Yeah, the Alps is a mountain range in Europe, stretching from France through to like Austria. I don't know exactly where it ends, but it's all through Europe.
Let's see. The Alps are Europe's highest and most extensive mountain range.
Yeah, Europe's for sure.
Yep. So, spanning 3 countries. Yeah, that's fitting. So Alp, very high, very expansive, and pain. And for quite a bit of the rest of the story, this weird thing about it drawing Maskel's attention, but also whenever he encounters it, it also being this terrible pain is going to keep coming up. That it's blue and spell branch is, well, the typical red sun, even though like it's actually a white sun. Though the actual Arcturus compared to our sun is a red sun. It's not white. Don't know if you were very close, if that would make any difference. I mean, our sun is yellow, but doesn't look very yellow. Looks mostly white to us. So Alp height, pain, and then also it sounds like all pain, and it is also all pain. Well, I've already mentioned this in the prior one. Spell branch clearly has something to do with Crag. All pain has something to do with crystal shaping. There are different natures, and so since everything here has a spiritual import as well as a physical import, uh, the pain Maskell feels is both of a physical kind, but also of a spiritual kind. Like the kind of like it's like the worst of everything. Imagine having a headache while also having a thought ache and a feeling ache of like just contradictory things ongoing at the same time, pulling you like every which way. Your very existence is a confusion which is trying to rip itself apart. See, for the short distance that remained of their walk, Maskell was very thoughtful and uneasy. He understood nothing. Whatever object his eye chanced to rest on changed immediately into a puzzle. The silence and stillness of the mountain peak seemed brooding, mysterious, and waiting. Panal gave him a friendly, anxious look, and without further delay led the way down a little track which traversed the side of the mountain and terminated in the mouth of a cave. This cave was the home of Panal and Joywind. It was dark inside. The host took a shell and, filling it with liquid from a well, carelessly sprinkled the sandy floor of the interior. A greenish, phosphorescent light gradually spread to the furthest limits of the cavern and continued to illuminate it for the whole time they were there. There was no furniture. Some dried, fern-like leaves served for couches. The moment she got in, Joywind fell down in exhaustion. Her husband tended her with calm concern. He bathed her face, put drink to her lips, energized her with his magan, and finally laid her down to sleep. At the sight of the noble woman thus suffering on his account, Maskell was distressed. Panal, however, endeavored to reassure him. It's quite true this has been a very long, hard double journey, but for the future it will lighten all her other journeys for her. Such is the nature of sacrifice. I can't conceive how I walked so far in the morning, said Maskell. And she has been twice the distance. Love flows in her veins instead of blood, and that's why she is so strong. You know she gave me some of it. Otherwise you couldn't have even started. I shall never forget that. The languorous heat of the day outside, the bright mouth of the cavern, the cool seclusion of the interior, with its pale green glow, invited Maskell to sleep, but curiosity got the better of his lassitude. Will it disturb her if we talk? No. But how do you feel? I require little sleep. In any case, it's more important that you should hear something about your new life. It's not all as innocent and idyllic as this. If you intend to go through, you ought to be instructed about the dangers. Oh, I guess as much. But how shall we arrange? Shall I put questions, or will you tell me what you think is most essential? Panal motioned to Maskell to sit down on a pile of ferns, and at the same time reclined himself, leaning on one arm with outstretched legs. I will tell some incidents of my life. You will begin to learn from them what sort of place you have come to. I shall be grateful, said Maskell, preparing himself to listen. Panal paused for a moment or two, and then started his narrative in tranquil, measured, yet sympathetic tones. Panal's story. My earliest recollection is of being taken, when 3 years old. That's equivalent to 15 of your years, but we develop more slowly here. By my father and mother to see Broodvile, the wisest man in torments. He dwelt in the great Wombflash forest. We walked through trees for 3 days, sleeping at night. The trees grew taller as we went along until the tops were out of sight. The trunks were of a dark red color, and the leaves were of pale fire. My father kept stopping to think. If left uninterrupted, he would remain for half a day in deep abstraction. My mother came out of Pullingdread, and was of a different stamp. She was beautiful, generous, and charming, but also active. She kept urging him on. This led to many disputes between them, which made me miserable. On the fourth day we passed through a part of the forest which bordered on the sinking sea. This sea is full of pouches of water that will not bear a man's weight, and as these light parts don't differ in appearance from the rest, it is dangerous to cross. My father pointed out a dim outline on the horizon, and told me it was Swallone's Island. Men sometimes go there, but none ever return. In the evening of the same day, we found Broodvile standing in a deep, miry pit in the forest, surrounded on all sides by trees 300 feet high. He was a big, gnarled, rugged, wrinkled, sturdy old man. His age at the time was 120 of our years, or nearly 600 of yours. His body was trilateral. He had 3 legs, 3 arms, and 6 eyes, placed at equal distances all around his head. This gave him an aspect of great watchfulness and sagacity. He was standing in a sort of trance. I afterward heard this saying of his: "To lie is to sleep. To sit is to dream. To stand is to think." My father caught the infection and fell into meditation, but my mother roused them both thoroughly. Broodvile scowled at her savagely and demanded what she required. Then I too learned for the first time the object of our journey. I was a prodigy. That is to say, I was without sex. My parents were troubled over this and wished to consult the wisest of men. Now, why would he use that word? I've actually never looked this up. Let's see. What would prodigy have to do with that? Prodigy, etymology, a sign, portent, something extraordinary from which omens are drawn. Directly from Latin, prodigium, prophetic sign, omen, portent, prodigy, from pro, forth before, igium, a suffix or word of unknown origin, perhaps from the same source as io, I say, see adage, or adjure, to derive, from Indo-European root ag, to drive, draw out, or forth, move. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
So prodigy is something that's pointing to or about to draw something else forward. So if he was sexless at the time, then he was shifting towards one way or another. Now, names of places. The time, 3 years is equivalent to 15 of our years. So we already know, like, their day is like twice as long. It's about 48 hours in total, for one total rotation, day and night cycle.
Yeah.
The
Those
years
are
5
5
to 1, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So he wasn't 15. He was like a 3-year-old, but it took 15 years from our perspective for him to become 3.
Yeah, which is also part of the mystical literature on this stuff. When you read that so-and-so, what is it? Is it Methuselah who lived 600 or some 900 years or whatever?
Methuselah, yeah.
Yeah. When you read about that, you also have to understand that it took a long time to be wise. People did physically grow up in the same way that we do now, but their mind developed much more slowly. So, what we now know, say when we're 30, they probably were like getting to understand when they were like 100.
Yeah, think of like elves in the Lord of the Rings, who live much longer, but they are still considered like teenagers at the age of 150.
Yep.
Or Yoda, if you're a Star Wars fan. He lived like 900 years or so. 800 years, something.
The name Brood, well, I said Bruva because like
Yeah.
the audio version that I listened to said Brood Vile, but I think viol is like related to like the instrument.
Instrument. Yep. Baroque and Renaissance instrument. Which corresponds to his 6 eyes, of course. You know, viols have 6 strings. 3 and 3. What does it say? His appendages?
Yeah, 3 arms, 3 legs.
Yeah. Another 6.
Let's see.
They're like
his
big
father.
cellos. I mean, they look like cellos, kind of. Somewhat.
Yeah. I was thinking like
They're
some
upright
kind
instruments.
of violin or something. Well, some
Yeah,
seems like a
violin
violin.
and viola are different than a viol, but yeah, they're
Okay.
all related instruments.
So yeah, brooding and probably attuned to the truth more than other people. He dwelt in the great womb flash forests. Well, if you're going to have wise men, you want them to be somewhere where ideas are born. Where would ideas be born other than a womb? And how are ideas that come about? Well, they come about in a flash. Everywhere on Torment seems to be just huge. They walk through trees for 3 days, and that's 3 of their days. So that's 24 times 3, 48, about 72 hours. The trees grew taller as long as they went along. The tops were so high that they couldn't even see them. The trunks were of a dark red color, and the leaves were of a pale old fire. I forget what old fire.
It was one of the colors.
Yeah, it's one of the colors, but I forget what it is that it occasioned in him. I think Jail's the one that, he said it was like wild and painful, but I forget what old fire was. His father seems to take after his father, where Panos seems to be a thinker, a brooder, but his father seemed to be addicted to brooding. Would just stop and think. If uninterrupted, he would remain for half a day in deep abstraction. Yeah, that's half a day is 12 hours. And I mean, shit. Even I can't do that. At the peak of my deep studies, I was doing about 12 hours a day, which didn't feel like 12 hours a day, but can't imagine just doing that impromptu the whole time. It's kind of difficult. His mother's from Poolingdred, interesting. Beautiful, generous, charming, also active, very much in line with somebody who's very aesthetic is active, whereas somebody who's contemplative is not. So this is very fitting. That Panaw seems to kind of be in a balance of both, to more extent than his father, at least. Makes sense given his mother and father. On the 4th day, we passed through a part of the forest, part on the sinking sea. Well, that was an obvious one. It'll be explained later on once Maskell makes it to the area, why the water works that way. Swallows Island. That will be explained once we get there. It's the most musical chapter in the whole book. So in the evening of that day, they found Broodveal standing in a deep, miry pit in the forest, surrounded on all sides by trees 300 feet high. He was a big, gnarled, rugged, wrinkled, sturdy old man. Makes me think of like the Ents from from Lord of the Rings.
The two
He's not yeah. I mean, he's not a tree, but you know, basically can. If you look gnarled, probably look a bit like a tree. He was 120.
Yeah, just rough. Like you think of a gnarled oak.
Yeah. So his age at the time was 120, nearly 600 bars. I think that's telling. 600. Numerology, 6 is 1 away from 7. 7 is the perfect number. 6 is the number of man. It's the number of the devil. Well, the number of the devil is 666, mainly to show the reason is because like the devil is so close and yet so far from perfection. So that, you know, like that closeness of to 7 tripled shows like how far away it is from it. So Broodveal is close to divinity at this point. And if this world that he's in is evil, as it is implied in many ways, he is attuned then to the truth of this world. His body was trilateral. Yep. This gave him an aspect of great watchfulness and sagacity. Makes sense. And he has a saying, to lie is to sleep, to sit is to dream, to stand is to think. Well, to lie is to sleep. In sleep, you're not doing anything. You don't necessarily have to be actively dreaming or not. But you're definitely not. You're neither receiving nor acting. To sit is to dream. Yeah, I mean you're awake, but you're not actively yet engaging in anything. All you can do is either receive an imagination or try to produce an imagination.
Yeah, dream in this sense is not like when you're asleep. It's when you're thinking about doing something, but you're not actually doing it.
Mm-hmm. And then
not thinking, but like, you know, think. It's like passive being.
Yeah. That's what this is. This is basically a form of Plato's divided line.
Yeah.
You go from like non-being, sleep, to image or representation, to actual like pure reason.
Yeah.
To pure reason being the highest reality. To activity. Yeah.
And thinking is active being.
Mm-hmm. Okay, continuing. Old Broodveal smoothed his face and said, "This perhaps will not be so difficult. I will explain the marvel. Every man and woman among us is a walking murderer. If a male, he has struggled with and killed the female who was born in the same body with him. If a female, she has killed the male. But in this child the struggle is still continuing." "How shall we end it?" asked my mother. "Let the child direct its will to the scene of the combat, and it will be of whichever sex it pleases. You want, of course, to be a man, don't you? Said my mother to me earnestly. Then I shall be slaying your daughter, and that would be a crime. Something in my tone attracted Broodweil's notice. That was spoken, not selfishly, but magnanimously. Therefore the male must have spoken it, and you need not trouble further. Before you arrive home, the child will be a boy. My father walked away out of sight. My mother bent very low before Broodweil for about 10 minutes, and he remained all that time looking kindly at her. I heard that shortly afterward all pain came into that land for a few hours daily. Broodweil grew melancholy and died. Harsh. His prophecy came true. Before we reached home, I knew the meaning of shame, but I have often pondered over his words since, in later years, when trying to understand my own nature, and I have come to the conclusion that, wisest of men as he was, he still did not see quite straight on this occasion. Between me and my twin sister, enclosed in one body, there never was any struggle, but instinctive reverence for life withheld both of us from fighting for existence. Hers was a stronger temperament, and she sacrificed herself, though not consciously, for me. As soon as I comprehended this, I made a vow never to eat or destroy anything that contained life, and I have kept it ever since. So, that's interesting. Don't know quite what to make about it. In one way, it's straightforward. It is what it says. In another way, there's deeper things that could be said about it.
Well, if I don't know what you mean, I don't think the audience will either.
Well, it's an interesting account of, well, gender in a way, gender and sex. Of course, in this world, like things things function differently. You know, here, well, you come in and you're already physically one or the other, usually.
Right. There is a point when you're not, and a point when you are, though.
Yeah.
So every male is a female that didn't manifest, and vice versa. Now, there is a precedent for this in some spiritualist trends and spiritualist traditions, where there is a divine twin, and if you are, a male, a guy, your divine twin is your twin sister. And there are a lot of things about this, not a whole lot, but, there are texts written about this that could be found. It's just not part of any of the traditions we've been speaking about, like Steiner or Casey or anything like that, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. And like here, things are split very hard, whereas with us, that's not the case. I mean, in all these like spiritual traditions, you have the idea of the divine feminine as well as the divine masculine.
Yes.
And one of the things is like you ought to have a balance. So you can't just be all masculine. There's nothing wrong with being masculine, but you can't just like be a one-sided character. One of the things that you strive for in all these spiritual disciplines is to come into balance and tap into that other gender side of you.
Which is a recognition of it, and adoption of it rather than, a wholesale, not to get into gender politics, but, like, you don't become a woman or become non-binary or something, but you adopt that into yourself and you become fully human. You
Yeah.
have the divine masculine, divine feminine sides of yourself in unity. This is an alchemical process as well.
So I mean, this is certainly interesting. Like as far as like like Panau is a bit of an actual non-binary at this point. This story that he's telling
Yeah.
about, like he was neither one or the other.
And his mother asks him, do you have intention to become a man? You're going to become a man, right? And he's like, well, that would kill your daughter. He's like, yeah, but you have to. It's not a choice that can be made. That you can't do either. You have to be one or the other.
Yep, and then let's see. His answer interests Boudeville, says that was spoken not selfishly but magnanimously. Therefore the male must have spoken it, and you need not trouble further. Before you arrive home, the child will be a boy. I don't know if I mentioned it. This book is metaphysically sexist. It's not hidden at all.
No.
But I think that in many ways, a lot of things in the story go against what seems to be an explicitly clear bias against femininity, and it ends up vindicating femininity, not over masculinity, but showing that it has a place within the actual soul of beings. Because here, like on the surface, it is going to be like taken to be the case that yes, the male aspect, the masculine is the superior, and it's not that like femininity is evil, but that femininity is inferior in the way that it's less seeking towards the divine. It's too much in immediate unity with this world. Being aesthetic is not bad, but one should not be remaining in aesthetic
complacency.
determination.
Yeah.
So long as you keep that in mind, and of
and
course, like what counts.
It must be noted that this is a spiritual thing. It's not a biological
it's not physical.
thing.
Yeah, it's not biological.
It's the divine masculine intention versus the divine feminine intention.
Yeah, because the best characters in this story are women.
Yeah.
And he even meta comments on it in the penultimate chapter. So anyways, magnanimity, one of the things that belongs to the masculine. So my father walked away out of sight. My mother bent very low through Boudeville for about 10 minutes. She remained all the time looking kindly at her. So Boudeville is clearly someone who's either enlightened or very close to being enlightened. It kind of reminds me of those like Indian holy men. Well, holy men in general, in India and in the West in various ways. So they leave. Shortly afterward, all pain came into that land for a few hours daily. Boudeville grew melancholy and died. All pain, melancholy, died. Quite fitting, 600 years old or so. It was already old.
And this is not, this is a relatively new planet, so he's probably one of the earlier beings too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few people mentioned that are historically famous in this world. So let's see. His prophecy came true. Before we reached home, I knew the meaning of shame. But I have often pondered over his words. Oh, yeah, we already read this. So he says that Panos says that from his view, he doesn't think there had been a fight, like Boudeville said. That Boudeville lacked insight in that actually both of them were magnanimous, and that he thinks that it was his sister who was actually the more magnanimous one, who had a stronger will towards self-sacrifice, and she sacrificed herself for him rather than he killed her.
Yeah. And that tracks.
Mm-hmm. So that's why, he vowed never to eat anything alive, and he has done so. While I was still hardly a grown man, my father died. My mother's death followed immediately, and I hated the associations of the land. I therefore made up my mind to travel into my mother's country, where, as she had often told me, nature was most sacred and solitary. Interesting contradiction. In this land, the people seem to love everything, but rather than love uniting things, everything just kind of goes its which way. None of the plants, really have any relationship as a species to each other. None of the beings really need each other because they don't feed on each other. That is a very strange contradiction when you think about it.
Yeah.
In the place where the most love seems to be explicit, love is the least necessary thing of all. One hot morning I came to Shaping's Causeway. It is so called either because Shaping once crossed it or because of its stupendous character. It is a natural embankment, 20 miles long, which links the mountains bordering my homeland with the Ifton Morass. The valley lies below at a depth varying from 8 to 10,000 feet, a terrible precipice on either side. The knife edge of the ridge is generally not much over a foot wide. The causeway goes due north and south. The valley on my right hand was plunged in shadow. That on my left was sparkling with sunlight and dew. I walked fearfully along this precarious path for some miles. Far to the east, the valley was closed by a lofty tableland connecting the two chains of mountains, but overtopping even the most towering pinnacles. This is called the Sant Levels. I was never there, but I have heard two curious facts concerning the inhabitants. The first is that they have no women. The second, that though they are addicted to traveling in other parts, they never acquire habits of the people with whom they reside. Presently I turned giddy, and lay at full length for a great while, clutching the two edges of the path with both hands, and staring at the ground I was lying on with wide open eyes. When that passed, I felt like a different man, and grew conceited and gay. About halfway across, I saw someone approaching me a long way off. This put fear into my heart again, for I did not know how we could very well pass. However, I went slowly on, and presently we drew near enough together for me to recognize the walker. It was Slowfork, the so-called sorcerer. I had never met him before, but I knew him by his peculiarities of person. He was of a bright gamboge color, and possessed a very long, proboscis-like nose, which appeared to be a useful organ, but did not add to his beauty, as I knew beauty. He was dubbed Sorcerer for his wondrous skill in budding limbs and organs. The tale is told that one evening he slowly sawed his leg off with a blunt stone, and then lay for 2 days in agony while his new leg was sprouting. He was not reputed to be a consistently wise man, but he had periodical flashes of penetration and audacity that none could equal. Sounds like a swell, rip-roaring, crazy guy. We sat down. Yeah. I mean, it fits. I mean, he's forking, growing new limbs, and all over the place here and there, new kinds.
Gamboge is this ugly orange.
Yeah. It's an orange.
Reminds of like radiation or something.
And if you ever seen a proboscis monkey, then that's
Yeah.
probably how his nose looks. So
Yeah.
let's see.
The phallic nose, you know.
Yep. So we sat down and faced one another, about 2 yards apart. "Which of us walks over the other?" asked Slowfork. His manner was as calm as the day itself, but to my young nature terrible with hidden terrors. I smiled at him, but did not wish for this humiliation. We continued sitting thus, in a friendly way, for many minutes. "What is greater than pleasure?" he asked suddenly. I was at an age when one wishes to be thought equal to any emergency, so, concealing my surprise, I applied myself to the conversation, as if it were for that purpose we had met. "Pain," I replied, "for pain drives out pleasure." "What is greater than pain?" I reflected. "Love, because we will accept our loved one's share of pain." "But what is greater than love?" he persisted. "Nothing, Slowfork." "And what is nothing?" "That you must tell me." "Tell you I will. This is Shaping's world. He that is a good child here knows pleasure, pain, and love, and gets his rewards. But there's another world, not Shaping's, and there all this is unknown, and another order of things reigns. That world we call nothing. But it is not nothing, but something." There was a pause. "I have heard," said I, "that you are good at growing and ungrowing organs." "That's not enough for me. Every organ tells me the same story. I want to hear different stories." "Is it true, what men say, that your wisdom flows in ebbs and pulses?" "Quite true," replied Slowfork. But those you heard it from did not add that they have always mistaken the flow for the ebb." "My experience is," said I sententiously, "that wisdom is misery." "Perhaps it is, young man, but you have never learned that, and never will. For you the world will continue to wear a noble, awful face. You will never rise above mysticism. But be happy in your own way." Before I realized what he was doing, he jumped tranquilly from the path down into the empty void. He crashed with ever-increasing momentum toward the valley below. I screeched, flung myself down on the ground, and shut my eyes. Often have I wondered which of my ill-considered juvenile remarks it was that caused this sudden resolution on his part to commit suicide. Whichever it might be, since then I have made it a rigid law never to speak for my own pleasure, but only to help others. So, yet another wise man who knew something. And what is with these people killing themselves or just dying? Let's see. Slowfork. Well, that's fitting. The thing on the question of pain or pleasure, he asked something, what is greater than pleasure? Why? Well, because the immediacy of this world is pleasure. He's at basically his teenage years, and he's like, well, I don't want to appear stupid. I got to say something. So he tries to say something, and he doesn't say anything stupid to Slowfork. I mean, what he answers with is actually very intelligent, quite clever. What is greater than pleasure? Well, pain, for pain drives out pleasure. And what is greater than pain? Love, because we will accept our loved one's share of pain. What is greater than love? Nothing. And what is nothing? And then this is totally the Gnostic thing. There's another world, not shapings, and there all this is unknown, and another order of things reigns. That world we call nothing, but it is not nothing, but something. So this is different to something like the Neoplatonic form of some Gnosticism, and this is, I'm not going to say like it's entirely fair to the Neoplatonics, but they had the whole idea of the one, and the one is just beyond being, and that's a true reality. And it's not that they thought it was nothing. I mean, compared to our world and from our standpoint of what we can say, it is nothing. But if you could ever just experience it, it wasn't nothing. Which is what the mystical experience allowed. The whole point of all these viewpoints was to engage in some practice by which you could have the direct personal experience of this other world, let's say, which isn't really another world. It's this world, just seen from the side of its truth. And it isn't nothing, but it's so unlike this world that there's nothing you can say about it. And when you return here, you don't know how to put it into words. You can hardly even remember what it is that you experienced. So let's see the thing about, you're good at growing ungrowing organs. And he says, it's not enough for me. Every organ tells me the same story. I want to hear different stories. As you can see, like with Maskell, he has these new organs, the poins, the breve, and the magen. And they are a new way for him to interact with the world. And they reveal things about the world, but they're still revealing things only about this world. And it seems that the famous slow fork had to do with his having grown every conceivable organ of how to experience this world. But he, just like Maskell, was bored of Earth. What did he say? He was tired of vulgarity. It seems Slowfork was tired of the vulgarity of torments. And so his constant growing and regrowing of organs seemed to be his own attempt to search for some new kind of insight, but there wasn't any, because all organs are of this world, so they would only give access to this world. Very fitting with his character. It is true, men say that your wisdom flows in ebbs and pulses. But he says, quite true, but those you heard it from did not add that they all have always mistaken the flow for the ebb. It's a very much a thing of mystics. They can say things that in one moment seem utter genius, but in other moments just seem utterly stupid, or banal, or banal. How did you say it?
Either way, doesn't matter.
And depending on who's listening, they may interpret things completely opposites to how they are intended, mainly because the mystic talks in either extreme abstractions or contradictions. It's the contradiction of, the wise man is like a child, but a child is not necessarily wise, and yet a child is wise without being wise. Yeah. It's one of those contradictions. So he says, people think that what I'm saying is wise, but that's actually when I'm being stupid, and then when people think I'm being stupid, I'm actually being wise. Then the second little discussion they have, Panos says, my experience is that wisdom is misery. I mean, which of us hasn't been there when we were teenagers?
Yeah.
And his answer is
especially
curious.
When you're surrounded by people who are unwise and think it's stupid to even try to better yourself. No.
Yeah, so
I like these
answers.
I had something to say about the flow ebb thing, though.
Yeah, sure.
that it's usually correct that, like people mistake what is wise for what is unwise or whatever. What is forward for what is backward or whatever. I think it's true.
Yeah. And I think it does appear that way to people, and it also feels that way.
Yeah. I mean, think about people who will hear something subjective that applies to them and they think it's deep and they say, wow, that's so deep because it, makes me feel an emotion, rather and mistaking like something that is objective or, like a universal emotion or something. And they're like, wow, that's not very deep or whatever, but they just don't understand.
Yeah, it's like Nietzsche.
Yeah.
A lot of what people think is wise in Nietzsche is just downright stupid. Yeah. And a lot of the things that people don't pay attention to that is actually wise, it's just like right there. So let's see. Slowfork's answer to his thing about wisdom is misery. Perhaps it is, young man, but you have never learned that and never will. And he's just met him. But then again, I mean, like these are people like they have some kind of telepathy and shit, so they see. And it's already being stated that from Pascal's perspective, he can already tell that they think at a speed that he can't even like come close to. So, obviously they don't speak to themselves in words like they're talking, like he's talking to Maskell, like at this point in the story. They normally just telepathically communicate. Why wouldn't they? Yeah, so they can read each other's like past very quickly if they want. So he sees that, he's a young man. He says this, he's like, but you have never learned that and never will. Now, why would he say you have never learned that and never will? Well, I think like you have never learned that because he's a fucking teenager. He doesn't know what wisdom is. I mean, this is just like typical, like, pseudo intellectualism, it's like teenage posing. And it's a pretty tall statement to say he never will, but given what this world is like, in this world, the kind of being that you are is more limited than the human being.
Yes.
You're more dominated by a given character than a human is, than Maskell is, for example. So he can tell what kind of being Panaw is, and from that he already knows it's not going to happen. For you, the world will continue.
That Slowfork is wise, and he does know that wisdom is misery, which is evident from his next action.
Yeah, he says, for you, the world will continue to wear a noble, awful face. You will never rise above mysticism, but be happy in your own way.
Noble in the sense that it is...
he's in awe of it. He's in awe of it.
Yeah, awful in the sense that he's in awe of it, not terrible.
Yeah.
Noble, like high moral, high thing.
So you will never be able to rise above mysticism. Why? Because, Panaw thinks, but he thinks superficially because he doesn't have to think, really. I mean, just look at the example of the stone, the beauty he produced. He just did it. His body just did it. His being just does it. He doesn't think about it, and he doesn't have to. Look at the way that they can interact with the plants. They don't have to intellectualize anything. The world just literally beams gnosis into their minds as to the level that where they're at. Mm-hmm. They don't really have to do any of the work of thinking.
Yeah,
And if you look at like the
mysticism.
things, yeah, so that's very mystical, like
It's very
the mysticism
derogatory.
thing. Yeah, it's not meant in the good way. Uh, and this goes along, yeah, like he's a very abstract person. I mean, look at like, despite his answers to Slowfork about the pleasure thing, what is greater than pleasure? They're very intelligent and very clever. Nonetheless, they're very superficial. And the fact that he's telling like Maskell this, and that from like Slowfork's response, I would say he completely misunderstood the value of what Slowfork told them.
Yep.
Because he thinks it had something to do with what he said, rather than pay attention to what Slowfork said and what it meant.
Yeah. So you'll never rise above mysticism. Think of like how someone will say in a derogatory way, like, "Oh, that's just New Age mysticism," "Oh, that's just that New Age mystical crap." But be happy in your own way. Ignorance is bliss. If you're not aware of the fact that full wisdom is misery, you will be blissfully ignorant of it. Because you don't have to know it. You don't have to experience it. And he can't experience it. At least Slowfork seems to think he can't. And he's right, honestly. That's not a spoiler. It's just true.
Yeah, even like that thing. Panos says, wisdom is misery. This is true, but in completely opposite senses.
Yeah.
The way Pana intends it is in the wrong way. Like, it's like, like wisdom is misery. It's better to be ignorant. And the way Slowfork says it, he says, perhaps it is, young man, but you have never learned that. Because Slowfork actually knows that wisdom is misery, meaning not that it is better to be ignorant, but that you ought to seek the miserable in this world, because that's where you're going to find wisdom. That's why he like the whole story of like him sawing off his leg. That's why you see like the yogis in India and like other people who get into like mystical practices, they seek renunciation. It's renunciation of the body. They seek renunciation of the material world. They like
Fast.
They fast and do all these things. Like, I mean, they mortify the body.
Yep.
Because
Some
they
drink
really
poison.
do know. Yeah, because they really do know that in some way, the pain is a sign that you are getting closer to truth. Now, that itself is one-sidedly true. And to that extent, it's also wrong. And it's going to come up later in the story that this is indeed not the full story. There's a group of people later on who glorify this, and like this is all that they do. But it is itself a trap. Because it isn't that pain itself is what makes wisdom. So I said, before I realized what he was doing, he jumped tranquilly from the path down into the empty void. He crashed with ever-increasing momentum toward the valley below. I screeched, flung myself down on the ground, and shut my eyes.
Yeah, so it's jumping down into the empty void, which is nothing, But for him, he knows it's not nothing, or at least he believes it's not nothing.
Mm-hmm.
He's headed towards something new. He crashed with ever-increasing momentum, so, he's hurtling toward it. He's not just like, oh, I'm sliding down into it. No, he's going ever faster because he's anticipating what will come after.
Yeah. And I think part of the way he does it, one, he's probably really old as well, like shortly.
Yeah.
Two, encountering him is kind of like, you know what, I've had enough of this shit. It is in part like Panos' fault, but not like on some moral level. It's just that it was kind of like, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back of like, you know what, I've been talking to idiots on Discord, like it's all the same. There's no point. Like, trying any further. Like, time to call it quits. But not in a bad way. Like, here, it's not that, like, Slowfork is depressed or anything. Goes like, oh, well, be me, this sucks. No, he's just like, fuck it. I'm done with this shit.
He's done everything. He's reached his peak. Like, all he can do now in this world.
Yeah.
Nothing else to do. Like, when you beat a game 100% and there's nothing else to do, you don't play anymore.
Yeah, basically. And I think it's also to prove to Pana, and Pana clearly did not understand it in the end, that Pana indeed would never come to, like, know that, that wisdom is misery.
And that it's not a good thing to be wise, ultimately, because, like, this is the conclusion. You're like, this is the best you can hope for, is to be like me, and then, here I go. Into the void.
Yeah, I think that's like what Pana took from it. I don't think that's what Slowfork meant, but I think Slowfork was just like he's like, this is what wisdom looks like, and Pana was like, oh shit, I fucked up, I said something wrong, but it wasn't because of what he said.
Yeah, it wasn't anything about what he said. It's kind of narcissistic for him to think it is.
Let's see. So I have often wondered which of my ill-considered juvenile remarks it was that caused this sudden resolution on his part to commit suicide. Whichever it might be, since then I have made it a rigid law never to speak for my own pleasure, but only to help others. Which on the surface seems like a very noble thing to do. So continuing. I came eventually to the Marest. I threaded its mazes in terror for 4 days. I was frightened of death, but still more terrified at the possibility of losing my sacred attitude toward life. That is a really important little comment right there. I was frightened of death, but still more terrified at the possibility of losing my sacred attitude toward life. The importance of a worldview cannot be underestimated. Like, people are more frightened of losing their worldview than they are frightened of dying. Because the idea is, well, if I lose my worldview, what do I have? Then I've metaphorically died, and it feels like you've died in a very significant way. And if you don't have anything that replaces it, you are doomed.
Yeah. May as well die.
When I was nearly through and was beginning to congratulate myself, I stumbled across the third extraordinary personage of my experience. The grim Muir Maker. It was under horrible circumstances. On an afternoon, cloudy and stormy, I saw suspended in the air without visible support a living man. He was hanging in an upright position in front of a cliff. A yawning gulf, 1,000 feet deep, lay beneath his feet. I climbed as near as I could and looked on. He saw me and made a wry grimace, like one who wishes to turn his humiliation into humor. The spectacle so astounded me that I could not even grasp what had happened. "I am your maker," he cried in a scraping voice which shocked my ears. "All my life I absorbed others. Now I am absorbed. Newclamp and I fell out over a woman. Now Newclamp holds me up like this. While the strength of his will lasts, I shall remain suspended. But when he gets tired, and it can't be long now, I drop into those depths." Had it been another man, I would have tried to save him, but his ogre-like being was too well known to me as one who passed his whole existence in tormenting, murdering, and absorbing others for the sake of his own delight. I hurried away and did not pause again for that day. So, Muir Maker. Not exactly sure what that name is.
Muir means to close. I thought it was a
Oh,
pun on
okay.
Mary Maker or something at first, but maybe not. Maybe it is Muir Maker because he does Zorb things.
Yeah, yeah. He puts an end. He encloses things within him. He absorbs
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Absorb or adsorbs. To absorb means to bring it within you and close it, and to adsorb means to put it on to you. And zorb is apparently a verb used first in 1909, meaning above. I don't know if he was aware of this. To take in, yeah, and hold by either adsorption or absorption.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just like absorption.
Yeah, and there's another noun usage in 1843 that means to sense. All right.
Yeah, I think it is
Yeah,
Mirror Maker.
close. Yeah, Muir Maker.
Yeah. New clamp. Well, new and clamp.
Yeah, this is new, like the Greek letter new.
So let's see. In Pooling Dread, I met Joywind. We walked and talked together for a month, and by the time we found that we loved each other too well to part. And by that time, we found that we loved each other too well to part. Panos stopped speaking. That is a fascinating story, remarked Maskell. Now I begin to know my way around better. But one thing puzzles me. What's that? How it happens that men here are ignorant of tools and arts, and have no civilization, and yet contrive to be social in their habits and wise in their thoughts? Do you imagine, then, that love and wisdom spring from tools? But I see how it arises. In your world you have fewer sense organs, and to make up for the deficiency, you have been obliged to call in the assistance of stones and metals. That's by no means a sign of superiority. No, I suppose not, said Maskell. But I see I have a great deal to unlearn. They talked together a little longer, and then gradually fell asleep. Joywind opened her eyes, smiled, and slumbered again. That's the end of that chapter. All right. That was good. I love that chapter.
Yeah, good
It's
chapter.
one of the best chapters.
Yeah.
All right. For those of you listening, see you around.